Hey, what is up guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Gran Turismo 7. So it's been a decent few weeks since 1.52 got launched to Gran Turismo 7, and with the likes of the PS5 Pro and Gran Turismo 7 seemingly getting a big push around that console, this got me thinking about what I want to see from Gran Turismo 7's next update and beyond. Let's start off then with Pikes Peak. I think this is a fairly major one and a fairly big talking point amongst the community. So if you didn't know, Polyphony do actually have the sole rights to Pikes Peak, and of course it's not in GT7 yet. We also had some rumours around the start of the year with Hyundai announcing another partnership with Polyphony to release some N-branded vehicles, of course very much teasing Pikes Peak styled vehicles. The South Korean company did go on to say that there would be more news towards the end of the year, and we're getting towards the end of the year without any official extra news just yet. And this would seem like the correct time at the latter stages of the year and the PS5 Pro almost upon us, that something would happen revolving around Pikes Peak and of course these N branded vehicles. As a Gran Turismo 2 player, this would absolutely be a dream come true to finally see Pikes Peak return in its modern shape and form in stunning detail. Let's move on to point number 2 next, the economy. I think this is a big one, and instead of just doing the likes of invitations and, longer races and all that stuff, I think I'm just going to kind of narrow this down into one big section, which is the overall economy of Gran Turismo 7. Whilst of course it has improved over time, and I think post-launch we've not really had that many expensive vehicles. A lot of the vehicles that have been in there since day one that are costing upwards of 20 million credits will take you on average around about 12 hours of straight gameplay just to get one single one. And honestly, it does seem that the economy, especially relating to the day one stuff, is just completely unbalanced at this point. I think the entire economy after 2.5 years on the market needs a massive restructuring so that everything comes in line and makes it overall a much fairer game. Again, the whole pushes car collection, so why not? Now next up, this might be a bit of a controversial one, but the end of the PS4 support. Of course, we've seen the likes of Sophi for the PlayStation 5 only, and of course with the PS5 Pro on the way and a big push around Gran Turismo 7 and its experimental modes for that console, it would only make sense that, look, if this is going to be the only GT release of this console generation, they really need to start thinking about rolling back that support for what is essentially a massively old console at this point, 11 years to be exact. So considering the age of the original console being so old at this point, it would make sense that Polyphony start to drop support for the PS4. At the end of the day, we're almost 4 years into the PS5's life cycle and it's already getting its mid-generation update. For me, dropping the PS4 support and focusing solely on bigger, more technical updates for the 5 and the Pro would just absolutely make sense in bringing better content overall. Next up is Class Overhaul. One of the most frustrating things for me when it comes to Gran Turismo 7 is mainly in the sport mode itself and just how wide open a lot of the grouping is for the vehicles. Now, if we think about the grouping system that's been around since GT Sport and then ported over into GT7 and then all the new additions to those classes and groupings, it really doesn't make sense that we have the likes of touring cars battling GT4 machinery, but yet they're both in the same class. I think just kind of dividing these up into smaller classes and then using races appropriated to that specific class would just make much more sense and allow many more cars to be much more useful and of course much more competitive. When you look at the car roster of GT7, there is a lot of race cars, and I can guarantee that 75% of those are just not used because of how wide open the grouping system is really now. So let's move on to the next one, the PP glitch fix. If you don't know what this is, ever since 1.49, if you did a bit of a janky tune with an engine swap vehicle, mainly on some of the older vehicles in game, it would actually give you an error and make that car completely unusable. In fact, it would then require require you to add a absolute ton of ballast or mess around with the power output to where the point of the whole engine swap and making these crazy builds are completely gone by the time you actually get around to fixing it. It also makes some cars seem absolutely unusable once they've got the swapping. No matter how much you edit the tuning sheet, it will just constantly bring up this PP glitch error. And although a lot of people are actually talking about this, it does seem that Polyphony have done absolutely nothing to actually go ahead and resolve this issue. Yes, they've made changes to the physics and such, but unfortunately they haven't made any changes to fixing this PP glitch error. So hopefully this gets sorted sooner rather than later. Now next up is actually going to be a throwback to the older Gran Turismo games. I honestly think that arcade mode and split screen definitely need a lot more love when it comes to Gran Turismo 7. It's a bit of a dying art. At the end of the day, Gran Turismo 7 is a widely accessible racing game. You've got your casual fans, you've got your more hardcore fans, you've got people that have been brought up with these games that might end up having, you know, children or family friends and stuff that they want to experience Gran Turismo with in the modern day. So I definitely think that they need more focus on the arcade portion of the game, as well as actually putting more focus into the split screen of the game to just make it much more fun. There is a lot lacking from both the arcade and split screen at present, and I definitely think Polyphony need to go back to their roots and just think about the more casual players as well as the hardcore players. It just seems like diversifying the market and pushing all your focus into career mode or multiplayer whilst dropping the arcade mode and split screen really is missing a whole bunch of players. Now next up is going to be the Sophi AI in Career. Now this is something that I think is progressing very well, is the Sophi AI in game. Ever since it launched last November in a full sense, we've been able to do quick races which have built up rather quite nicely, and I genuinely think at the tracks that Sophi is now working at, which I believe there's been an extra for since the initial launch, we should start seeing it implemented into the AI in Career. At the end of the day, if this AI has begun to learn how to drive certain cars and a bunch of them around certain tracks in the game, why not go ahead and start implementing the Sophi AI in those pre-existing career events? I just feel like it's a way to make the actual single player just much more enjoyable, considering that Gran Turismo 7's typical AI is pretty terrible. In fact, with the AI being so bad, it's probably why we see a lot of the chase the rabbit style events to make them artificially quicker. Next up is going to be bigger grids. I think this is something that's bugged a lot of people since the early days of GT7. It did seem that we had bigger grids early on, and then they were kind of just taken away after the servers were completely bugged and never ever came back. I think the minimum requirement for some of these bigger races in GT7 Sport mode should be 20. That is hands down a decent amount of size of a grid, and again, especially considering the likes of the PS5 Pro version, it shouldn't be too bad if they of course get rid of that PS4 support. Just supporting the PS5 and the PS5 Pro should see bigger grids, and that's not even to mention the single player, where of course if we've got AI in the game, why not have 30 to 40 cars on some of these bigger tracks in game over longer, more strenuous events? This is one thing that a lot of racing games seem to be able to do, is push out bigger grids on the bigger tracks, and I certainly feel like Gran Turismo 7 definitely needs to go that way and start putting these bigger grids in overall. Next up is going to be a UI overhaul. If there's anything that really bugs me about Gran Turismo 7 is actually the menu system. Not necessarily the way that it's laid out. I do think that the way we jump in and out of menus gives a lot of personality across the board. However, it's just the way that they're actually set up. To really get from one place, as if you needed to change a car or something like that, just seems to take a million extra clicks to then have to go back to where you want to be to of course start a race or something like that. It's very much about taking the long way round, and quite often, more than not, it can really drag you out of the experience. Poor menu design is one of the biggest killers almost for any game. Whilst we have seen improvements like the race shop over time, really since then it's kind of just been left as is. And again, it just feels like you're doing a million different things to then just get back to the point of where you want to be. So definitely some extra shortcuts in the menu and just making it much easier to get through. Next up is going to be B-Spec. When it comes to players of older Gran Turismo games, I definitely think B-Spec is a huge deal, myself included. It's one of the coolest things to ever happen to the Gran Turismo series, and it's a massive shame that it's missing from GT7. I think it would be absolutely perfect as well if they managed to implement this with the likes of Sophi AI, so that all of the AI that of course you're guiding through a B-Spec career will be insanely competitive. I think B-Spec is just a huge deal for Gran Turismo in general, and to see it lacking from this return to form, which is supposedly Gran Turismo 7, is a massive missed opportunity. Not only being able to go out on track and do the races yourself, but then having this sort of management side career is absolutely awesome. My best memories really with it are from Gran Turismo 5, where it was absolutely almost perfect. So there we go, that is 10 things I would love to see implemented in Gran Turismo 7, especially with the likes of the, mid-upgrade console, the PlayStation 5 Pro on the way, and of course Gran Turismo 7's big push around it. It does seem like there is a lot of eyes on this game to be sort of the real next-gen racer, especially with that extra power of the console. And things like dropping the PS4 support and focusing purely on this current gen after 4 years of having it on the market would certainly seem like one of the best and biggest things to do, especially when it comes to the technical stuff and really pushing the boundaries. Anyway, let me know what you think. What are 10 things you want to see? I'll be gathering your comments for a community video in a few days' time. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, guys. Peace.